day, I'd been to El Paso, where some buddies I called Cheech and Chong had given me a huge baggie filled with Mexican dirtweed. So of course it figures that before the tapings in San Antonio, Vince called a meeting to inform all the wrestlers that in a few weeks, drug testing would be expanded to cover any and all non-prescription drugs, including marijuana. Vince said that with the FBI and the media waiting to pounce on him, the WWF couldn't take a chance on another scandal. I believe and still do that Vince's decision was short-sighted. With weed taken off the menu, even more wrestlers wound up as alcoholics. Instead of smoking a bit of weed holed up in their hotel rooms, talking about the business, they roam hotel bars drunk and on downers. I handed a big fat joint to Owen and explained that it was probably the last time we'd be able to smoke pot for a while. Owen, so straight-laced most of the time, let his hair down, and we both took a few hits. We pulled up to the strip bar feeling good. Inside, a bunch of wrestlers crowded around Hulk at the far end of the room. Beefcake was there, having recovered enough from the parasailing accident to come back for limited duty. Unfortunately, with steel plates holding his face together, he could no longer wrestle in a serious capacity. Standing off to the side were Hawk, Animal, Kurt, Bossman, and Ray Hernandez, a muscle-bound Tampa powerhouse who worked a Hercules gimmick. I introduced Owen around, spotted Jim and Davey at a table, and ordered beers for all of us. Vince came in around midnight. That was unusual enough because Vince didn't make a habit of hanging out with the boys. But what really turned heads was that Vince was shit-faced, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. Pat Patterson tagged behind him trying to persuade him that it was a bad idea to be there in his condition. But Vince had decided that he was going to have one last party with the boys before the new drug policy went into effect. Sergeant Slaughter offered to keep an eye on him and act as his designated driver, so Pat fled through the front door as though he'd been chased out by the sight of all those naked women. Then I heard Hogan daring a wild-eyed Hawk into doing the LOD finish on Vince right there in the bar. Suddenly Animal crouched behind Vince, stuck his head between Vince's legs, and picked him up off the floor. Vince was laughing as Animal walked him over to all of us. Hawk had already climbed up on the bar, gripping a stripper pole, assuring Hulk that he was going to take Vince's head off. I thought, wow, he's actually going to do it. But at the last second, Hawk thought better of it and leapt off the table, gently hitting Vince with his arm. Hulk and Beefcake caught Vince and set him on his feet to a round of golf claps from an assortment of ass-kissers who seemed to materialize on cue. I rolled my eyes at Jim, who boldly declared, "The Hart Foundation would have had the balls to do it." Damn right, I had a beer in one hand and a shot of JD in the other, but was conscious enough to think, my God, what did I just say? Owen's eyes got big. I considered running out of the place as I watched the determined Jim nonchalantly pick up a grinning Vince like he was jokingly hugging him. The boys parted before me, and Hulk stared as if there was no way I had the balls to do it. I set my drinks down, and before I could even think about it, I leapt high in the air, clotheslining Vince with a thud. His head bounced off the carpeted floor. His skinny neck stretched out like a turtle's. There we both were, lying on our backs, and I thought, what have I done? "You owe me a drink, Hitman," Vince drunkenly slurred. "Don't worry, I'm buying. Double doers on ice." We tossed them down. Last call came and went, and the lights came up, but nobody was leaving. Davey had Vince over his shoulders and was running around looking for a place to power slam him. The police were called to clear us all out. With Owen and an assortment of strippers in my car, we joined a train of about 30 cars about to head downtown for a party in Flair's penthouse suite at the Marriott. The procession couldn't get by a police cruiser parked in front of the strip bar, so Slaughter, with his big chin sticking out, burned the rubber off his tires as he pushed the cop car to the side of the road. At about 3 a.m., the drunken mob descended upon a young male desk clerk to call Flair's room. No answer, so Vince demanded a key. The flustered clerk said it was against hotel policy, but Vince cut him off. "I'm Vince McMahon. Give it to me right now." He got the key. We all packed into the elevators and headed up to the 40th floor. We piled into Flair's room, waking Earl Hebner, the referee, who was asleep on a rollaway bed. Flair hadn't yet returned from his own night of misadventure, so we made ourselves at home. It was a beautiful suite with a full-size bar, but the bar was stocked with only one full bottle of vodka. The party was about to die when a bag of dirtweed mysteriously appeared and joints were rolled and lit. I saw firsthand what the boys thought of Flair when everybody used his king-sized bed as a urinal. Even Vince, stripped down to his boxers, black shoes and socks, and his tie. I remember Hercules and Kurt laughing as they hosed it down, and for some reason I thought nobody would have done this to Harley Race. Then Vince got it in his head to have some fun amateur wrestling with us. When he came for me, I was careful and playful with him, as was Kurt. Then Vince took Hawk down and pinned him to the floor. When he grabbed Herc hurled Vince upside down into the air, but Vince somehow bounced off Earl's rollaway and landed on his feet. Vince gave Herc a sober glance that said, "In the morning, if I can remember any of this, I'll fire you." In fact, only days later, Herc was released. Then Vince sized up Jim. "You big rhino. You're the only guy I haven't tried yet." Jim twisted the tip of his beard and asked Vince whether he'd ever seen that scene in Die Hard where Bruce Willis tackles some villain and they both fall 40 floors down to the lobby. Vince nervously glanced at the window, knowing that Jim was crazy and drunk enough to do something like that. He decided to leave Jim alone. By sunrise, Flair still hadn't made it to his own party, and I was drunk and leaning on a stripper as she helped me get my room key in the door at the Crockett Hotel. That morning, everybody had to drive up to Austin for the second day of TVs. Vince was red-eyed and red-faced, still clearly feeling the effects of his wild night. In his office, I told him that he could hold his head up high for having the balls to hang out with the boys for one last hurrah. And then I promptly went out and drew a big blackboard cartoon of Vince in his boxers pissing in Flair's bed. It broke every